I am Natalie Parker, 28 years old now, but 10 years ago I was the valedictorian my parents called the ugly one at my own graduation celebration. The words still echo sometimes when I look in the mirror, though not as loudly as they once did. Being disowned that same night left me homeless with college acceptance letters I could no longer afford. The journey from that devastating moment to where I stand today shaped everything about me. Before I share my story of heartbreak and eventual triumph, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit subscribe if you want more stories of resilience, and give this video a like if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Growing up in Fairfield County, Connecticut, meant pristine lawns, luxury cars and driveways, and parents who were obsessed with keeping up appearances. My parents, Richard and Diana Parker, embodied this mentality perfectly. Our Tudor-style house was featured in local magazines, my mother served on charity boards, and my father's law practice catered to the wealthiest families in the area. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. Behind closed doors, it was a different story. Natalie, don't slouch. No one wants to look at that posture, my mother would say at the breakfast table when I was just 8 years old. Or, sweetie, maybe you should skip dessert tonight. Those cheeks are looking a bit full. These comments were daily occurrences, casual observations tossed at me between sips of coffee or while flipping through magazines. My younger sister Brittany, however, received entirely different treatment. 2 years my junior, Brittany had the blonde hair, blue eyes, and delicate features my parents considered ideal. Brittany, you look absolutely adorable in that dress. Or, our little beauty queen is going to break hearts someday. The contrast was unmistakable, and it shaped my understanding of my worth from an early age. By 3rd grade I had developed a strategy. If I couldn't be the pretty one, I would be the smart one. I threw myself into academics with a determination that surprised my teachers. I won the spelling bee, got perfect scores on math tests, and read books meant for children years older. My parents acknowledged these achievements with brief nods or distracted "that's nice dear" responses, before turning their attention back to Brittany's ballet recitals or pageant preparations. Middle school brought new challenges. While other girls were experimenting with makeup and giggling about crushes, I retreated further into my books. Social anxiety crept in as I internalized the idea that I was somehow fundamentally flawed. A few kind classmates attempted friendship, inviting me to birthday parties or study groups. Mom, Jessica invited me to her sleepover this weekend, I said one Thursday evening, heart racing with hope. Jessica, is she that dentist's daughter? My mother asked, barely looking up from her phone. I don't think that's a good idea. Those group photos always end up on social media, and you know how you photograph. The conversation was over, and so was my budding friendship with Jessica, who eventually stopped trying after my 3rd declined invitation. Art became my sanctuary in 7th grade. Mrs. Andrews, the art teacher, praised my detailed sketches and encouraged me to express myself through painting. For hours after school, I would lose myself in color and form, creating worlds where appearance didn't determine value. When the school announced an art showcase for parents, I worked for weeks on a self-portrait that subtly incorporated all the words my parents had used to describe me over the years, hidden in the background pattern. I need you to sign this permission slip for the art showcase, I told my father, sliding the paper across his desk one evening. He glanced at it briefly. What are you exhibiting? A self-portrait, I answered, unable to hide my excitement. Natalie, he sighed, setting down his pen. Don't you think your talents would be better applied to something more practical? Besides, your mother mentioned your art is rather mediocre. We don't want to encourage false hope. The unsigned permission slip remained on his desk as I retreated to my room. By 8th grade graduation, the pattern was set. Brittany stood in the center of every family photo, while I was positioned slightly behind, often partially cropped out in the versions my mother chose to frame. My academic achievements were treated as expected, rather than celebrated, while Brittany's average grades were praised as showing such improvement. I entered Fairfield High School with the naive hope that things might change. I was older now, more accomplished. Surely my parents would begin to see my value. I clung to this hope despite all evidence to the contrary, because the alternative, accepting that nothing I did would ever be enough, was too painful to bear. High school brought a strange duality to my life. In the academic realm, I thrived. I took every advanced placement course offered, served as editor of the school newspaper, and maintained a perfect GPA. In the social realm, I remained nearly invisible, not actively bullied but simply unseen. I ate lunch in the newspaper office, spent free periods in the library, and avoided the cafeteria and school dances with equal determination. The one bright spot in my high school experience was Miss Johnson, my AP English teacher and newspaper advisor. Unlike my parents, she saw beyond my plain appearance to the mind and person beneath. "This essay on media bias is exceptional, Natalie," she told me. After class one day, my paper marked with an A+ and thoughtful comments. "You have a natural talent for journalism, the way you analyze information and present complex ideas clearly. Have you considered pursuing this in college?" That simple question opened a door I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. With Miss Johnson's encouragement, I began researching journalism programs, feeling a spark of passion ignite when I read about Columbia University's prestigious School of Journalism. Meanwhile, home life continued its familiar pattern, though the contrast between my treatment and Brittany's grew even starker as she blossomed into what my mother called a natural beauty. Now a cheerleader dating the quarterback, Brittany embodied every high school cliché, and my parents couldn't have been prouder. The spring of sophomore year brought a particularly painful incident. I needed new clothes, having outgrown most of my wardrobe. "Mom, I really need to go shopping this weekend." "Nothing fits anymore," I mentioned at dinner. My mother looked up from her plate, scanned me from head to toe, and sighed. "Honestly, Natalie, why waste money trying to make you look presentable? Let's focus on Brittany's homecoming dress instead. That's where it will make a difference." I pushed my food around my plate, fighting back tears as my father nodded in agreement, and Brittany launched into an excited description of the dress she wanted. That night I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, trying to see what they saw, wondering if there was something fundamentally wrong with me that no amount of achievement could fix. Despite these moments, or perhaps because of them, my passion for journalism grew. I transformed the school newspaper from a basic events calendar into a publication that tackled real issues: mental health among teens, economic disparities in our affluent community, environmental concerns. Under my leadership, the paper won statewide recognition, and I compiled a portfolio of my best work, dreaming of Columbia. By junior year, the tension at home escalated when college discussions began. My parents assumed I would apply to the state university and live at home, a practical choice for someone they saw as having limited prospects. "I want to apply to Columbia's journalism program," I announced one evening, gathering my courage. "Miss Johnson thinks I have a real chance with my grades and journalism experience." "Columbia?" my father scoffed. "Do you have any idea what that costs? Besides, journalism is hardly a stable career path. You need something practical, something that doesn't require you to be in the public eye." "What your father means," my mother added with a practiced smile, "is that we think accounting or perhaps library science would suit you better. Something behind the scenes." Their message was clear: don't aim too high, don't draw attention to yourself, accept your limitations. But something had shifted in me. Miss Johnson's belief in my abilities had taken root, and I wasn't willing to surrender my dreams so easily. With Miss Johnson's help, I secretly applied to Columbia and several other top journalism programs. We used her address for correspondence, and she helped me navigate the financial aid forms as best we could, without my parents' information. When the thick envelope from Columbia arrived at her house in December of senior year, I opened it with trembling hands in her living room. Congratulations, Natalie. Early admission to Columbia University with a merit scholarship consideration. I read aloud, my voice breaking. For the first time, I felt validated. Experts in the field thought I was worth investing in, even if my own parents didn't. That momentary triumph came crashing down when my mother found the acceptance letter in my backpack 2 weeks later. I'd brought it home foolishly, hoping that the prestigious acceptance might finally make them proud. "What is this?" she demanded, waving the letter. "Columbia. When did you apply? And who gave you permission to apply to schools across the country?" "I didn't think I needed permission," I replied, standing my ground for perhaps the first time. "I'm 17 and this is my future we're talking about." The argument that followed was explosive. My father called me ungrateful and deceitful. My mother lamented how I was always trying to draw attention to myself when I should know better. Brittany watched wide-eyed from the doorway as years of pent-up frustration poured out of me. "Why can't you just once be happy for me?" I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "Why is it so hard to believe that I might actually be good at something?" "We're being realistic," my father snapped. "Something you clearly aren't capable of. This discussion is over. You're applying to state and that's final." I went to bed that night with a strange mix of despair and determination. They might control the purse strings, but somehow I would find a way to Columbia. Little did I know that our confrontation over college applications would pale in comparison to what would happen at graduation just a few months later. June 12th dawned clear and perfect. Exactly the kind of day you'd want for your high school graduation. As valedictorian, I'd spent weeks crafting my speech, revising it countless times with Miss Johnson's guidance. Standing before my mirror in the pale blue graduation gown cap slightly askew, I practiced one last time. My hands shook slightly, but not from fear of public speaking. I was afraid of what my parents would think. Despite everything, some childish part of me still craved their approval. "Natalie, the car is leaving in 10 minutes with or without you," my mother called from downstairs. The ceremony was being held on the football field, rows of white chairs arranged in perfect symmetry beneath a cloudless sky. As I took my place with the other graduates, I spotted my parents and Brittany in the family section. My mother was fixing Brittany's hair while my father checked his watch impatiently. Neither looked in my direction. The principal's introduction felt distant, as though I was hearing it underwater. Then suddenly it was my turn. I approached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces. Fellow graduates, esteemed faculty, family, and friends. I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Today marks not just an ending, but a beginning. We stand at the threshold of our future selves. I spoke about perseverance, about finding your path even when obstacles seem insurmountable, about defining success on your own terms and the courage it takes to pursue your dreams when others don't see your vision. As I spoke, I saw Miss Johnson nodding encouragingly from the side of the stage. A few parents dabbed at their eyes. Even some of my classmates, peers who had barely spoken to me throughout high school, were listening intently. "Whatever challenges await us," I concluded, "remember that you have already proven your resilience by reaching this milestone. Trust in your ability to overcome what lies ahead. Congratulations, class of 2015. We did it." The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Students stood cheering. Teachers beamed with pride. It was a moment of perfect validation, except for the 3 people whose reaction I sought most. My mother was checking her phone. My father was clapping with the mechanical politeness of someone following social protocol. Brittany at least gave me a small smile and thumbs up when our eyes met briefly. After the ceremony, extended family gathered at our house for a celebration. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends filled our backyard, where my mother had arranged catering and decorations in the school colors. I received polite congratulations as I moved through the crowd, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this party wasn't really for me. My suspicion was confirmed when my father tapped his glass for attention. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this special day," he began, smiling broadly. Diana and I are so proud of both our girls. Brittany will be graduating next year, already accepted to UCLA with a cheerleading scholarship. He paused for appreciative murmurs and applause. And of course, Natalie has done well academically. He lifted his glass higher. To my daughters Brittany, our beautiful girl with the brightest future ahead of her, and Natalie, who, well, she may not have been blessed with her sister's looks, but at least she's smart. I suppose we all have to work with what we've got. The silence that followed was deafening. My Uncle Robert choked slightly on his drink. My mother's friend Patricia suddenly became very interested in rearranging the napkins. My cousin Emma shot me a look of horrified sympathy. I stood frozen, the glass of sparkling cider halfway to my lips as the full impact of my father's words sank in. He had just called me ugly at my own graduation celebration, in front of everyone who mattered to us. Richard, my Aunt Susan finally said, her voice tight. That was inappropriate. My father looked genuinely confused. What? It's just the truth. Natalie knows what she is. Something broke inside me at that moment. The last thread of hope that somewhere deep down they actually loved me for who I was. And what exactly am I, Dad? I asked, my voice quavering but clear in the uncomfortable silence. The ugly daughter you've been embarrassed by since I was a child. The one you and Mom have been tearing down for 18 years because I didn't fit your idea of what a daughter should look like. Natalie, don't make a scene, my mother hissed, stepping forward. Your father was just making a toast. No, he was doing what you both have always done. Making sure I know my place. Making sure I understand that no achievement will ever be enough, because I committed the unforgivable sin of being born plain in a family obsessed with appearances. Guests were starting to edge away, murmuring awkwardly. Brittany stood wide-eyed beside our mother, looking torn between embarrassment and a flicker of something that might have been understanding. That's enough, my father said coldly. You're making your mother upset. I'm making her upset. I laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. What about how I feel? Has that ever mattered to either of you? If you're so unhappy here, perhaps you should leave, my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. In fact, since you're so determined to pursue this ridiculous journalism dream against our wishes, you can do it without our support. Don't expect us to pay for Columbia or welcome you back for holidays if this is your attitude. My mother gasped. Richard! No, Diana, I'm done. She's 18 now, an adult. She wants to make her own decisions. Fine, but there are consequences. I looked from one parent to the other, searching for any sign that this was just anger talking, that they didn't really mean to disown me on my graduation day. I found nothing but cold resolve in my father's eyes and conflicted weakness in my mother's. Brittany, I turned to my sister, hoping for support. She looked at the ground. Maybe you should apologize, Nat. You know how Dad gets when he's angry. In that moment, I understood that I was truly alone. Without another word, I placed my glass on the table, walked through the silent crowd of relatives, and went upstairs to my bedroom. With mechanical precision, I packed a suitcase with clothes and necessities, grabbed my laptop and the small amount of cash I'd saved from tutoring. I didn't cry. Not yet. As I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, my Aunt Susan tried to intercede. Richard, Diana, this is madness. You cannot throw your daughter out for standing up for herself. Stay out of this, Susan, my father replied. This is between us and Natalie. I paused at the door for just a moment, giving them one last chance to call me back. No one did. And so, still wearing my graduation dress, I walked out of my childhood home, unsure where I was going, but knowing I could never return to the people who should have loved me most but had failed me so completely. The reality of being homeless hit me like a physical blow as I stood at the bus stop 3 blocks from my parents' house. Graduation, dress wrinkled, mascara smudged from the tears I'd finally allowed myself to shed. With a suitcase, backpack, and less than $400 to my name, I had nowhere to go in college, starting in less than 2 months. I called the only person I thought might help, Miss Johnson. Her voice was sleepy when she answered. It was nearly 10 p.m. "Natalie, is everything okay?" "They kicked me out," I said, my voice breaking. "My parents disowned me at the graduation party." 20 minutes later, her Honda Civic pulled up to the bus stop. She didn't ask questions, just helped me load my suitcase and drove me to her modest 2-bedroom condo. "The guest room isn't much," she said, showing me a small space with a twin bed and simple dresser. "But you can stay as long as you need to figure things out." The next morning, reality came crashing down in the form of practical problems. Without my parents' financial information, my financial aid application for Columbia was incomplete. My merit scholarship would cover only a portion of the astronomical cost. "I need to defer my acceptance," I told Miss Johnson over coffee, my voice hollow. "There's no way I can afford Columbia now." "Let's not give up just yet," she replied, though I could see the concern in her eyes. "There are emergency procedures for students in situations like yours. Independent student status exists for a reason." The next few weeks became a blur of bureaucratic nightmares. I called Columbia's financial aid office daily, explaining my situation to whoever would listen. I filled out appeal forms, gathered evidence of my estrangement, and waited anxiously for decisions. Meanwhile, I applied for every job within walking distance of Miss Johnson's condo. I managed to land 2 minimum wage positions: morning shifts at a local coffee shop and evening work at a grocery store. Between them, I worked nearly 60 hours a week, coming home exhausted only to face more financial aid paperwork and uncertainty. A text from Brittany came 3 weeks after graduation. "Mom and Dad say you can come home if you apologize and agree to State University." No mention of their cruel treatment, no acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused. I didn't respond. When I tried calling her the following day hoping to explain my side, she answered coldly. "Look, Nat, you embarrassed everyone at the party. Dad's colleagues were there. Mom's had to explain to everyone why you're not home. Just swallow your pride and come back. They called me ugly at my graduation celebration, Brit. They've been doing this my entire life. Don't you see how wrong that is? They're not perfect, but they're our parents. I have to go." She hung up, and with that final click I lost my sister too. By mid-July, I had saved enough for a deposit on a cheap apartment, but the Columbia situation remained unresolved. The financial aid office was sympathetic but bound by federal regulations. Without a documented history of abuse or official emancipation, proving independent status was nearly impossible. A ray of hope appeared when a co-worker at the coffee shop, Rachel, mentioned she was looking for a roommate for her apartment near Columbia. "It's tiny, and the building's ancient, but it's affordable with 2 people and walking distance to campus." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of possibility. If I could secure housing near Columbia, maybe I could take out additional loans, work part-time during school, somehow make it work. But then came another devastating blow. The financial aid appeal was denied. Even with independent status, the gap between my scholarship and Columbia's cost was insurmountable without parental support or crippling private loans that required a cosigner, something I didn't have. Depression descended like a heavy fog. I continued going through the motions, making lattes, stocking shelves, returning to Mrs. Johnson's guest room. But the future I'd worked so hard for seemed to be slipping away. Panic attacks became frequent, striking in the middle of shifts or waking me from fitful sleep. "I should just give up," I told Miss Johnson one evening in early August. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was reaching too high. "That's your pain talking, not your reason," she replied firmly. "We'll figure this out." But even her unwavering support couldn't fix the impossible math of my situation. The fall semester was approaching and I had no viable path to Columbia. I began researching community colleges, trying to convince myself it wasn't the end of my dreams, just a detour. The true rock bottom came during a morning shift at the coffee shop. A customer who looked remarkably like my mother ordered a complicated drink and then complained it wasn't right. Something about her dismissive tone, the way she looked through me rather than at me, triggered all the pain I'd been trying to manage. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and slid down to the floor, silent tears turning to body-shaking sobs. I covered my mouth to muffle the sound as everything crashed down at once. The loss of my family, my home, my college dreams, my sense of self-worth. In that moment, hunched on a bathroom floor in my coffee-stained apron, I contemplated giving up completely. Not just on Columbia, but on everything. "Natalie, are you in here?" Rachel's voice echoed in the small bathroom. "Your break ended 15 minutes ago. Mark's getting worried." I wiped my face and opened the stall door beyond caring what I looked like. "Oh honey," Rachel said, immediately pulling me into a hug. "What happened?" "Everything," I whispered. "I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to keep fighting when nothing works out." Rachel led me outside for some air covering for me with our manager. As I sat on the curb behind the coffee shop trying to pull myself together, my phone pinged with an email notification. "Probably just another rejection," I muttered, but opened it anyway. The subject line read, "Regarding your situation, Columbia School of Journalism." The sender was Dean Margaret Foster. "Dear Miss Parker," it began. "Your academic advisor, Miss Johnson, has contacted me about your extraordinary circumstances. I would like to meet with you tomorrow at 2 p.m. to discuss potential options. Please confirm if this time works for you." I stared at the screen, afraid to hope but unable to stop the tiny spark that ignited in my chest. Whatever this meeting was about, it represented something I desperately needed. A possibility, however small, that all was not lost. The Columbia School of Journalism building was imposing, all stone and tradition. I stood outside for several minutes, smoothing down the one professional outfit I owned, a navy blue dress borrowed from Miss Johnson, before gathering the courage to enter. My heart pounded as the elevator carried me to the 4th floor where Dean Foster's office waited. "Miss Parker, please come in," said a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. Dean Margaret Foster had the precise, measured way of speaking I associated with distinguished journalists. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. "Thank you for meeting with me, Dean Foster," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I appreciate any guidance you can offer about my situation. Miss Johnson has told me quite a bit about you." She began opening a folder that I recognized as my application. "Valedictorian, award-winning editor, exceptional writing samples. Your credentials speak for themselves." She looked up, studying me carefully. She also shared the circumstances of your estrangement from your family and current financial predicament. "It's an unfortunate situation, to put it mildly." I nodded, unsure what to say. "I'll be direct, Miss Parker. Each year the journalism school has a single full scholarship reserved for extraordinary circumstances. It's not advertised and the criteria are flexible. The scholarship covers tuition fees and a stipend for basic living expenses." My breath caught. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying your application was already remarkable. Add to that the resilience you've shown in the face of unconscionable treatment, and the committee and I are in agreement. We would like to offer you this scholarship beginning this fall semester." The room seemed to tilt slightly. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Dean Foster replied with a small smile. "Then we can discuss the details and get your housing arranged." Tears blurred my vision as the impossible suddenly became possible again. "Yes," I whispered. "Absolutely yes." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Rachel confirmed she still needed a roommate, and with the housing stipend, I could afford my share of the tiny apartment in Washington Heights, a 30-minute subway ride from campus. I gave notice at both jobs, packed my meager belongings, and said a tearful goodbye to Miss Johnson, who had saved me in every way a person can be saved. "I'll never be able to thank you enough," I told her on my last night in Connecticut. "Live well and be happy," she replied, hugging me tightly. "That's all the thanks I need." New York City was overwhelming, noisy, fast-paced, and utterly different from suburban Connecticut. Our apartment was indeed tiny, a fifth-floor walk-up with temperamental plumbing, and neighbors who argued loudly in Spanish. But it was mine, a place where no one judged me for my appearance or made me feel small. The first day of classes brought a mixture of excitement and terror. I sat in the back row of Introduction to Investigative Journalism, taking meticulous notes, and too intimidated to speak. Many of my classmates came from privilege, private schools, legacy families, internships arranged through connections. I felt like an imposter waiting for someone to realize I didn't belong. Professor Reynolds, a former Washington Post reporter with a Pulitzer on his resume, called on me despite my attempts to remain invisible. "Miss Parker, what ethical considerations should a journalist prioritize when dealing with vulnerable sources?" I swallowed hard and answered, drawing on research I'd done for the high school paper when covering student mental health issues. To my surprise, he nodded approvingly. "Precisely. Well articulated." After class, a girl with purple-streaked hair and multiple ear piercings approached me. "That was a good answer. I'm Zoe. Wanna grab coffee?" That simple interaction became my first friendship at Columbia. Zoe introduced me to her study group, Jesse, a former military journalist, Maya, a documentary filmmaker, and Daniel, who had worked for his hometown paper since high school. They didn't care about my clothes or my unremarkable appearance. They cared about my ideas, my writing, my perspective. Still, adjusting wasn't easy. The academic pressure was intense, and the emotional aftermath of my family's rejection lingered like a shadow. I struggled with imposter syndrome, convinced that any success was a fluke and failure was inevitable. Nightmares about my father's graduation toast plagued my sleep. When professors praised my work, a voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother whispered I didn't deserve it. 3 months into my first semester, Dean Foster called me to her office again. "How are you adjusting, Miss Parker?" Well, I think I answered automatically. "Classes are challenging but interesting." She studied me with those perceptive eyes. "Your professors speak highly of your work, but several have mentioned you seem reluctant to accept recognition. Professor Reynolds says you look like you might faint when he asked to publish your ethics paper in the department journal." I looked down at my hands. I'm still getting used to positive feedback. "The school offers counseling services," she said gently. "Many students find it helpful, especially those dealing with significant life changes or past trauma." I nodded, not committing but considering the idea for the first time. The turning point in my academic career came in the spring semester with my first real internship opportunity. The Nexus, a respected online news outlet focused on social justice issues, selected me from dozens of applicants to work on their education inequality series. My assigned mentor, Vivian Chen, was everything I aspired to be: sharp, ethical, and fearless in pursuing important stories. Under her guidance, I researched and co-wrote an article about first-generation college students from disadvantaged backgrounds. "You have a natural ability to earn people's trust," Vivian observed. "After I conducted a particularly moving interview, they sense your genuine interest in their stories." Drawing on my own experiences, I wrote a companion piece about emotional abuse in achievement-oriented families and its impact on students' mental health. The article was deeply personal, without being autobiographical, examining the broader social dynamics while incorporating research and expert opinions. I submitted it to Vivian with trepidation, half expecting rejection. Instead, she pushed it up to the editor-in-chief, who decided to feature it as a standalone piece rather than part of the series. "This is exceptional work, Natalie," Vivian told me. "Vulnerable without being self-indulgent, informative without being clinical. It's exactly the kind of journalism we need more of." When the article published, it struck a nerve. Within days, it had been shared thousands of times across social media. Comments poured in from readers who recognized their own experiences in the dynamics I described. The piece was picked up by larger outlets, bringing unexpected attention to both the Nexus and to me as a writer. One morning, I received an email that changed everything. Allison Murray, an acquisitions editor at Sentinel Publishing, wanted to discuss expanding the article into a book. Your piece resonated with so many people, she wrote. There's clearly an audience hungry for an honest, well-researched exploration of this topic. Would you be interested in discussing a potential book project? I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the message. A book deal? Based on my article, it seemed impossible, something that happened to other people. Established writers with connections and credentials, not freshman journalism students with second-hand laptops. I showed the email to Zoe, who squealed and hugged me. This is huge, Nat. You have to do it. I don't know if I'm ready to write a book, I admitted. I'm still figuring out how to be a student. Then you'll figure out how to be a student who's writing a book, she replied with characteristic directness. This is your chance to tell the story that needs telling. The meeting with Allison Murray was surreal. Lunch at a restaurant I could never have afforded on my own, discussing advances and royalties and publication timelines. She outlined a vision for a book that would combine personal narrative, investigative journalism, and expert insights on family dynamics, academic pressure, and resilience. We see this as part of a broader conversation about redefining success and healing from childhood emotional trauma, Allison explained. Your voice has an authenticity that can't be manufactured. I left the meeting with a preliminary contract to review, and a head spinning with possibilities. That night, I called Miss Johnson to share the news. I knew you were destined for great things, she said, her pride evident even through the phone. Just remember to take care of yourself through this process. Writing about trauma, even when it's framed academically, takes an emotional toll. Her words proved prophetic. As I began outlining the book while maintaining my coursework, the emotional weight of examining my past so closely became increasingly difficult to bear. After a particularly rough week of nightmares and anxiety attacks, I finally took Dean Foster's advice and scheduled an appointment with the University Counseling Center. Dr. Liu, a calm, thoughtful therapist specializing in family trauma, became another crucial support in my life. What you're experiencing is normal, she assured me, after hearing my story. Your parents' treatment was emotional abuse, and writing about similar dynamics is bringing that trauma to the surface. With her guidance, I began the slow, painful process of untangling my self-worth from my parents' valuation. I learned techniques to manage anxiety and recognize negative thought patterns. Most importantly, I began to understand that my experiences, while painful, gave me insight and empathy that strengthened my writing rather than undermined it. By the end of freshman year, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined that desperate day in the coffee shop bathroom. I had meaningful friendships, academic success, professional recognition, and a book deal. The scared, rejected girl from Connecticut was becoming a confident young woman with a voice worth hearing. As I packed up my dorm room for summer break, I'd be staying in New York working on the book and a paid internship at the Nexus. I found myself staring at my reflection in the window. For the first time in years, I didn't immediately look for flaws or hear my mother's critical voice. Instead, I saw someone resilient, someone with value beyond appearance, someone with a future bright enough to eclipse the shadows of the past. 4 years after that fateful graduation day, I sat in my publisher's office holding the first printed copy of my book, Invisible Achievement: Breaking Free from Family-Imposed Limitations. The cover was simple but striking. A blurred image of a young woman standing tall against a measuring scale that couldn't possibly capture her worth. My name, Natalie Parker, appeared in bold letters beneath the title. The early reviews are exceptional, Allison said, sliding a printout across the desk. The New York Times Book Review calls it a necessary examination of achievement culture and emotional abuse, written with journalistic precision and personal courage. The Atlantic says it's required reading for educators and parents alike. At 24, I had accomplished more than I'd ever imagined possible. My Columbia degree hung on the wall of my small but comfortable Brooklyn apartment. My position as a staff writer at the Nexus had evolved into a role as a featured columnist, focusing on education, family dynamics, and mental health. The book's release was generating interview requests from major media outlets. Yet despite these professional triumphs, personal happiness remained elusive. The ghost of my parents' rejection haunted quieter moments. Therapy had helped tremendously, but some wounds heal slowly, leaving scars that ache when the weather changes. "Are you ready for the book tour?" Allison asked, interrupting my thoughts. "I think so," I replied, though the prospect of public speaking about such personal topics filled me with dread. 12 cities in 3 weeks, right? Including a stop in Hartford, she confirmed, watching my reaction carefully. "We can reroute if that's too close to home." "No," I said with more confidence than I felt. "I can handle Connecticut." The third stop on the tour was a magazine feature for Style and Substance, a publication focused on women's professional achievements. The photo shoot took place in a sunlit studio in Manhattan, where I met Alex Evans, the photographer assigned to the project. "I want to capture something beyond the standard author portrait," he explained, adjusting his camera. "Your book deals with seeing beyond surface judgments, so let's create images that reflect that depth." Alex was thoughtful and respectful, taking time to make me comfortable before the camera. When he showed me the preliminary shots, I was startled by the woman looking back at me. Confident, intelligent, with a quiet beauty I'd never recognized in myself. "These are surprising," I admitted. "Why?" "They're just you," he replied simply. That comment, casual to him, profound to me, marked the beginning of something unexpected. After the shoot, Alex asked if I'd like to grab coffee. Coffee led to dinner, dinner to more conversations, and gradually to a friendship that felt different from any I'd known before. Alex saw me, truly saw me, in a way no one outside my small circle of friends ever had. He admired my work, challenged my thinking, and most disconcertingly found me beautiful. "I don't know how to accept compliments about my appearance," I confessed one evening after he'd said I looked lovely. "My parents spent 18 years telling me I was ugly. It's hard to unlearn that." "Your parents were wrong about many things," he said, taking my hand. "That was just one of them." As our relationship developed, so did my career. The book became a surprise bestseller, resonating with readers far beyond the original target audience. I received hundreds of emails from people sharing their own stories of family-imposed limitations and paths to healing. Universities invited me to speak. Mental health professionals incorporated my work into their practice. But as my public profile grew, so did my anxiety about the relationship with Alex. Old insecurities resurfaced, the voice of my mother whispering that someone like him, talented, kind, conventionally attractive, couldn't possibly want someone like me. I began creating distance-canceling plans, finding fault with small things. "What's really going on, Natalie?" Alex finally asked after I'd pushed him away for the third time in 2 weeks. "Something's changed, and I don't think it's your feelings for me." "How do you know what I feel?" I snapped, defensive. "I don't," he said quietly. "That's why I'm asking instead of assuming." His patience cracked something open in me. "I keep waiting for you to realize you made a mistake," I admitted, tears threatening. "That you could do better than me, better than a brilliant, compassionate, beautiful woman who's changing lives with her work." "I'm not sure such a person exists," he replied, the sincerity in his eyes almost too much to bear. "I don't know how to believe I deserve this." "Deserve you?" I whispered. "Maybe that's not something you have to figure out alone," he suggested, pulling me closer. Just as I was learning to accept love and genuine connection, professional recognition reached new heights. My investigative series on systemic barriers facing first-generation college students won the Preston Award for Excellence in Educational Reporting, a prestigious honor that came with a significant cash prize and considerable industry attention. The awards ceremony was held at the Whitman Hotel in Manhattan, a glittering affair attended by the most respected names in journalism. I wore a midnight blue gown chosen with Zoe's help, my hair and makeup professionally done, a far cry from the insecure girl in borrowed clothes who had first arrived at Columbia. Natalie Parker has demonstrated exceptional commitment to amplifying voices that often go unheard in our educational system, the presenter announced. Her work combines rigorous research with compassionate storytelling, creating journalism that not only informs but transforms. As I approached the podium to accept the award, I scanned the audience, seeing friends, colleagues, and Alex beaming with pride. And then in the back of the room, 3 faces I never expected to see: my parents and Brittany. My prepared speech dissolved in my mind. How had they found out about this event? Why were they here? The room seemed to tilt slightly, but I gripped the podium and forced myself to focus. Thank you for this tremendous honor. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. When I started investigating barriers to education, I was examining my own experience as much as others. We all face obstacles on our path to becoming who we're meant to be. Sometimes those obstacles come from systems and institutions. Sometimes they come from the people closest to us. I delivered the rest of my speech on autopilot, accepting the award and returning to my seat beside Alex, who squeezed my hand knowingly. They're here, I whispered. I know, he replied. I saw them come in. Do you want to leave? I shook my head. No, this is my night. I won't let them take it from me. After the ceremony, as guests mingled with champagne and conversation, my mother approached. She looked older, more tentative than I remembered. Natalie, she said, her voice soft. Congratulations on your award. Your father and I are surprised by how well you've done. The backhanded compliment was so typical that I almost laughed. Thank you for coming, I replied formally. How did you know about tonight? We saw the announcement in the Hartford Courant, she explained. Brittany thought we should come. My sister stood awkwardly beside our father, who hadn't approached. She gave a small wave. Your book, my mother continued hesitantly. It's very revealing. It's truthful, I corrected, though not specifically about our family. People we know have read it, she said, a hint of the old concern for appearances surfacing. They've made connections. That's not my responsibility, I replied evenly. The conversation continued in this strained manner for several minutes, superficial pleasantries barely masking the chasm between us. They made no acknowledgement of their past behavior, offered no apology for the pain they'd caused. My father remained distant, speaking only when directly addressed. Brittany seemed caught in the middle, occasionally shooting me apologetic glances. As they finally prepared to leave, my mother touched my arm lightly. Perhaps we could have dinner sometime when you're back in Connecticut. I don't come to Connecticut anymore, I said simply. But thank you for the invitation. After they left, I found myself trembling with adrenaline and unresolved emotion. Alex guided me to a quiet corner away from curious eyes. Are you okay? He asked, genuine concern in his voice. No, I admitted. I thought seeing them again would feel different, that something would be resolved. But they're exactly the same, still unable to see me, still unwilling to acknowledge what they did. What did you need from them? He asked gently. The question caught me off guard. What did I need? An apology seemed insufficient after years of systematic emotional abuse followed by complete abandonment. Understanding, recognition, love. I don't know, I whispered. But whatever it is, I don't think they're capable of giving it to me. That night marked another turning point. I'd achieved professional recognition at the highest level, come face to face with my past, and walked away intact, shaken but not broken. Yet the encounter made it clear that external success, public validation, even the Preston Award couldn't heal the deepest wounds. That work remained ahead of me, and for the first time I felt truly ready to undertake it. Tell me about the first time you remember feeling inadequate because of your appearance, Dr. Sarah Whitman asked during our initial session. After the award ceremony, I decided to seek more intensive therapy. Dr. Liu had been helpful during college, but I needed someone specializing in complex family trauma. Dr. Whitman came highly recommended, though her direct approach was occasionally uncomfortable. I was 6, I replied after a moment's reflection. My mother was hosting a charity committee meeting. One of the women commented on how pretty Brittany was. She was 4 then with these perfect blonde curls. My mother agreed and then looked at me and said, "Natalie takes after my husband's side. We're hoping she grows into her features." Dr. Whitman nodded. "And how did that make you feel?" "Confused at first, then ashamed, like there was something wrong with me that everyone could see." Over the following months, we excavated memories I'd buried, examining patterns of criticism and conditional approval that had shaped my self-perception. The work was painful but necessary, like resetting a bone that had healed incorrectly. "Your parents' treatment wasn't about you," Dr. Whitman emphasized repeatedly. "Children don't cause emotional abuse. Your appearance was simply the easiest target for their own insecurities and prejudices." Intellectually, I understood this. Emotionally, the journey toward believing it was longer and less linear. One breakthrough came during a particularly difficult session focused on my father's graduation toast. "I've analyzed this incident as a journalist," I explained. "I understand the power dynamics, the public humiliation, as a control mechanism, the cultural context of valuing female appearance above achievement. But I still feel that 6-year-old shame when I remember his words." "That's because you haven't given yourself permission to be angry," Dr. Whitman observed. "You've intellectualized the experience to distance yourself from the pain, but you haven't fully processed the emotion." "What's the point of being angry now?" I asked. "It won't change what happened." "Anger is a necessary part of healing from injustice," she explained. "It's a recognition that what happened to you was wrong and not your fault. Until you allow yourself to feel that anger, the shame will continue to fill that space." That night I tried something Dr. Whitman had suggested: writing a letter I would never send. For hours I poured 18 years of hurt, rage, and betrayal onto the pages, addressing my parents with all the raw emotion I'd never expressed. By the final page, tears had smudged the ink, but I felt lighter somehow, as if naming my anger had diminished its power. As my internal work progressed, so did my relationship with Alex. After nearly a year of dating, we'd grown closer, but my instinct to self-sabotage remained a challenge. "I want to talk about what happened last week," Alex said one evening as we walked through Brooklyn Bridge Park. We'd been invited to a gallery opening featuring his photography, and I'd made an excuse not to attend at the last minute. "I wasn't feeling well," I replied automatically. "Natalie," he said gently but firmly, "we both know that's not true." I stopped walking, looking out over the East River to avoid his gaze. There would have been so many people there, your colleagues, mentors, friends, all wondering what you're doing with someone like me. "Someone like you," he repeated. "You mean someone brilliant, accomplished, and genuinely kind? Someone I'm proud to be with." "You know what I mean," I insisted. "Actually, I don't," Alex replied, "because the way I see you and the way you see yourself are completely different, and I'm tired of competing with the voice in your head that tells you you're not enough." His honesty startled me. "I'm trying," I said quietly. "I know you are," he acknowledged, taking my hand. "But I need you to try something different. Instead of assuming what other people think about you, about us, give them a chance to show you who they are. Most people aren't your parents, Natalie." His words stayed with me, a gentle challenge to my most basic assumptions. At our next session, I shared the conversation with Dr. Whitman. "Alex is asking you to practice trust," she observed. "Not just in him, but in your own judgment, and in the possibility of genuine connection with others." "It's terrifying," I admitted. "Yes," she agreed. "But consider the alternative: a life constrained by fear, always anticipating rejection that may never come." Slowly, I began taking calculated risks. I attended the next exhibition featuring Alex's work, allowing him to introduce me to his artistic community. Instead of the judgment I feared, I found curiosity, warmth, and respect for my work. I spoke more openly with friends about my ongoing struggles with self-worth, discovering that my vulnerability strengthened rather than weakened our connections. As my personal healing advanced, I found myself drawn to help others with similar experiences. The foundation began as a simple idea: use a portion of my book royalties and award money to establish scholarships for students estranged from their families due to abuse or rejection. Working with a small team of advisors, including Dean Foster, we created the New Beginnings Foundation, offering financial support, mentorship, and community to young adults pursuing higher education without family backing. What started as a personal project quickly grew as other donors recognized the need being addressed. We've received over 200 applications for the first round of scholarships, Maya, who had joined as program director, reported during a planning meeting. Each story is more heart-wrenching than the last. We can only fund 20 this year, I noted with frustration. How do we choose? The same way someone chose you, she reminded me. By recognizing potential that might otherwise be lost. The day we announced our first cohort of scholarship recipients remains one of my proudest moments, more meaningful than any award or recognition I'd received for my writing. Seeing the relief and validation in the eyes of these young people who had been told in various ways that they didn't matter enough to support healed something in me that therapy alone couldn't reach. 6 months into the foundation's work, I received an unexpected email from Brittany. We hadn't spoken since the awkward encounter at the awards ceremony nearly a year earlier. I've been following your foundation online, she wrote. What you're doing is amazing. I've been thinking a lot about our childhood and how differently Mom and Dad treated us. I owe you an apology for not standing up for you and for staying silent when they disowned you. I'd really like to talk if you're open to it. I stared at the screen, conflicted emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to ignore the message to protect myself from potential disappointment, but another part, the part that had been working so hard on healing, recognized this as an opportunity for reconciliation I never expected. After discussing it with both Alex and Dr. Whitman, I agreed to meet Brittany for coffee during her next trip to New York. We chose a quiet cafe in the West Village neutral territory for this tentative reconnection. She looked different. More mature, less polished than I remembered. The perfect blonde princess had been replaced by a young woman with simple clothes and a nervous smile. "Thank you for meeting me," she began. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted. "I've been in therapy," she said, surprising me with her directness. "After reading your book, I started examining our family dynamics from a different perspective. It's been enlightening and painful." "You read my book?" I asked, genuinely surprised. 3 times she nodded. The first time I was defensive, the second time I was sad, the third time I was angry, not at you but at them, and at myself for being complicit. Over the next 2 hours, Brittany shared her own journey of realizing how our parents' favoritism had damaged both of us in different ways. While I'd been made to feel inherently flawed, she'd been valued primarily for her appearance, creating a different kind of prison. "I've distanced myself from them," she revealed. "Not completely cut off, but I've set boundaries. Dad doesn't like it." "I can imagine," I said, remembering his controlling nature. "I'm really sorry, Natalie," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "For everything. For not seeing what was happening, for not defending you at graduation, for taking so long to understand." Her apology, offered without qualification or excuses, was something I hadn't realized I needed. As we hugged goodbye, promising to stay in touch, I felt another piece of my past finding resolution. In the weeks that followed, Brittany and I began rebuilding our relationship, not as the roles we'd been assigned in childhood, but as adults discovering each other anew. She volunteered to help with the foundation, bringing valuable perspectives from her work in education. As my personal and professional life flourished, I faced a decision I'd been avoiding: whether to attempt any reconciliation with my parents. They had made occasional overtures since the award ceremony, birthday cards, a Christmas greeting, but nothing that acknowledged or apologized for the past. "What would healthy reconciliation even look like?" I asked Dr. Whitman during a session. "That depends on what you need and what they're capable of," she replied. "Reconciliation doesn't necessarily mean returning to a close relationship. Sometimes it means finding a way to make peace with what happened, whether or not the other person can participate in that process. After much reflection, I decided to send them a copy of my second book, Building Bridges: Healing Family Estrangement, which explored pathways to reconciliation after family trauma. I inscribed it simply, "If you're interested in understanding my journey, this might help, Natalie." It was a small olive branch, requiring minimal emotional investment, while leaving the door open to potential dialogue. Whether they would walk through that door remained to be seen, but for the first time I felt strong enough to extend the invitation without my well-being hanging in the balance. The culmination of my healing journey came unexpectedly during a foundation event honoring our newest scholarship recipients. As I looked out at these young people, diverse in background, appearance, and circumstance but united by resilience, I realized something profound. The very experiences that had once threatened to destroy me had become the foundation of my Phaeton's greatest contributions to others. The pain hadn't disappeared, it had transformed into purpose. The rejection had become the catalyst for creating a community where everyone belonged. The criticism that once diminished me now fueled my determination to affirm others' intrinsic worth. I wasn't healed despite my wounds, but because I had learned to integrate them into a more complete, compassionate self, and in that realization I found a peace I never thought possible. Today marks my 28th birthday. The morning sun streams through the windows of our Brooklyn brownstone apartment, warming the hardwood floors where I sit cross-legged with my morning coffee. Alex is still asleep, the ring he gave me 3 months ago, catching light on my left hand. It's strange to reflect on how much has changed in the decade since that devastating graduation day. My third book was released last month to critical acclaim. The New Beginnings Foundation has supported over 50 students in pursuing higher education with a 90% graduation rate. My column for The Atlantic explores the intersection of family dynamics, mental health, and societal expectations. By conventional metrics, I've succeeded beyond what anyone, especially my parents, might have predicted. But the most significant changes aren't visible on my resume. They're in the quiet moments when I catch my reflection without flinching, in the ease with which I now accept compliments, in the boundaries I maintain without guilt or fear. They're in the chosen family I've built around me, friends who see and celebrate my whole self, mentors who guide without controlling, a partner who loves me not despite my imperfections, but with full awareness of my humanity. 2 weeks ago, I received an email from my mother asking to meet. After consulting with Doc Whitman and discussing it with Alex and Brittany, I agreed to coffee at a neutral location, a small cafe halfway between my office and her hotel. She arrived 15 minutes early, appearing nervous and somehow smaller than I remembered. Her hair had more gray, and the lines around her eyes were deeper. We exchanged awkward greetings before settling at a corner table. "Thank you for the book," she began, referencing the copy I'd sent months earlier. "I've been reading it, trying to understand." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "Some of it is difficult to accept," she admitted. "The parts about parents projecting their insecurities onto children, about conditional love based on appearance or achievement." She paused, stirring her untouched coffee. "Richard, your father, doesn't agree with much of it. He thinks families should remain private." "Is that why he didn't come today?" I asked. "He's not ready," she replied, which we both knew meant he might never be. "But I wanted to try. Brittany speaks so highly of you now, of the work you're doing, and seeing your success reading your books. It's made me question things." "What kind of things?" I pressed gently. "Whether I made mistakes in how we raised you. Whether I was wrong to let your father speak to you the way he did. Whether I've been hiding behind social expectations instead of seeing what was really happening." It wasn't a full acknowledgement or apology, but it was more reflection than I'd ever heard from her. We talked for nearly 2 hours, carefully navigating topics that had been taboo for decades. She didn't suddenly transform into the mother I'd needed as a child, nor did I regress into the daughter desperate for approval. We were two adults attempting to find common ground across a chasm of hurt and misunderstanding. As we prepared to leave, she asked hesitantly, "Would it be all right if I contacted you again sometime?" "Yes," I answered truthfully. "With some conditions. I need respect for my boundaries, acknowledgement of the past without defensiveness, and understanding that our relationship will never be what it might have been but could potentially become something new." She nodded, her eyes revealing a mix of sadness and hope. "I'd like to try. I don't know if my mother and I will ever build a meaningful relationship. I'm not sure my father will ever be capable of the self-reflection necessary to participate in genuine reconciliation. But I've reached a place where their limitations no longer define me. Their approval is no longer the measuring stick of my worth. My relationship with Brittany has blossomed in unexpected ways. Free from our assigned roles as the pretty one and the smart one, we've discovered genuine connection based on shared experiences and mutual respect. She recently joined the Foundation's board, bringing valuable perspective from her work with adolescents struggling with self-image issues. The Foundation continues to grow with new programs addressing the specific challenges faced by estranged young adults. We've established support groups, emergency housing partnerships, and career mentorship opportunities. Each success story: a nursing student graduating debt-free, an engineering major securing her first internship, a visual artist exhibiting their work, feels like a personal triumph. A validation of the belief that everyone deserves support in becoming their full selves. Alex and I will marry next spring, in a small ceremony surrounded by our chosen family. His quiet strength and unwavering acceptance have been constants in my healing journey, though I've learned that true healing comes from within. No partner, no achievement, no external validation can substitute for the internal work of reclaiming your own worth. What would I tell that heartbroken 18-year-old standing outside her parents' house with nowhere to go? That the road ahead is harder than she can imagine, but she's stronger than she knows. That the people who should have loved her unconditionally failed her, but that failure reflects their limitations, not her value. That she will find people who see her completely and love her authentically. That the pain will never completely disappear, but it will transform into wisdom, empathy, and purpose. Most importantly, I would tell her that one day she will look in the mirror and see not the ugly girl her parents dismissed, but a woman of substance and worth who has built a life filled with meaning, love, and genuine connection. A life far richer than anything she could have imagined on that terrible graduation day. Have you ever had to rebuild your sense of self-worth after years of criticism from those who should have supported you? How did you find healing? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else feel less alone on their journey. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation, and share with anyone who might need to hear that their value isn't determined by those who failed to see it. Thank you for listening, and remember, you are worthy of love and belonging exactly as you are.